In this video, we are going to look at more ways that we can use the recursive formula other than just the arithmetic and geometric that we have looked at already. So in our first two examples, we are going to write out the first 5 terms of each recursively defined sequence. Just to identify a couple things, we know that a sub n minus 1 means the previous term. And then by the same means that a sub n minus 2 means 2 terms before. Still referring to a previous term, but 2 before the one that you're looking at. So what I'm going to do is write out what we have so far vertically, and then we'll put it into a sequence horizontally. I have the first 2 terms, 1, 1. If I want to find the third term, that's going to come from adding up the previous term, which is a2, and 2 before that, which is a1. So I'm doing 1 plus 1. That will give me 2 for my next term. And then for a4, we're going to add the previous term to 2 before that. So the previous term is a3, 2 terms before would be a2. So now we're going to be adding 2 plus 1, and that'll give us our 4th term. Once you get the hang of the pattern, it will get a little easier. The initial getting used to this type of sequence and figuring out the pattern that's happening is always the tricky part. So here we're doing the previous term, which is a4, and 2 before, which is a3. So we're doing 3 plus 2, and that will give us 5. Now I'm at my 5th term here. I'm not sure if you recognize what this sequence is. This is called the Fibonacci sequence. And in terms of a formula, we really need to define this with the recursive form. So it's easy to generate, not easy to find a term further along in the sequence. Our second example, we'll just have the first term, and then an is equal to n times the previous term. So you have to be careful because n is now part of it. So each time the n changes, that number will also change. So again, we have a1 is 4. a2 is going to be 2 times the previous term, which is 4, and gives us 8. So I'm going to write it out that way and then also write it out in our normal sequence form. And then a3 is going to be 3, because that's my n value, times the previous term, which is 8. Gives me my next term. And you keep going with this process until you're at the number of terms that you've been asked to find. So a4, since our n value is 4, that will change to 4. And then we're going to pull down our previous term of 24 to get 96. And then one more term, a5, is equal to n, which is 5, times a sub n minus 1, so our previous term, which is 96, and that gives us 480. And then we have our 5 terms, so we're going to stop there. Now for the next one, just so that we can see a pattern, I'm going to go with 7 terms. But for the rest, we'll still stick with the 5. So a1 is equal to 5. a2 is equal to 26. And then we'll do an is equal to an minus 1, meaning the previous term, minus an minus 2. So the terms that it's 2 before. So similar to the first one, except we're subtracting, so we'll get a slightly different result. If I take the previous term, which is a2, and subtract 2 terms before, which is a1, I get 26 minus 5, or 21. So we're going to list out my sequence off to the side. a4 is going to be a3 minus a2. So a3 is 21, a2 is 26. Now when you get better at this, you don't have to write out the subscripts like the A3 and the A2 part here, but I think it helps to see it initially. Okay, so that gives me negative 5. A5, I'm going to do A4 minus A3. So the previous term and then 2 before it. So that will be negative 5 minus 21, get negative 26. So we'll notice some interesting things about the sequence when we get to this point. We're getting the same numbers, but negative. And then A6 is going to be A5 minus A4. So negative 26 minus negative 5, which puts me back at negative 21. Then when I get to A7, A6 minus A5, I get back to 5. And if I keep going, I'm going to end up getting a repeating pattern that will happen. All right, so we have 3 more examples that we're going to do. I'm going to save those for a second video, so this video will be in 2 sets. But take a minute to kind of digest what's happening here before you move on to the next video.